Hello everyone, I'm George from Ireland, so welcome back to my channel once more. So I want to make this video on the occasion of the centenary of the publication of Ulysses, James Joyce's magnum opus, as many people think it. Some people would say that his real masterpiece was Finnegan's Wake, but that of course is deliberately unreadable. Having one sentence is it hundreds of pages long and things like that, and in dream language. I remember there's a book called The Skeleton Key to it. I must attempt it again sometime. So Ulysses was published in installments before this, set famously on Bloom's Day, a certain day in June 1904. One year I happened to find myself in Bucharest on that, and there's a reading in Romanian of the text. And of course the centenary of Bloomsday, people in Dublin acted it out, but Bloomsday's been going since the 80s certainly, people often meeting wearing Edwardian dress and walking around Dublin, and that noted Joycean Senator David Norris, once presidential hopeful, he takes a leading part in the proceedings, but I really would like to be in Dublin one Bloomsday and to take part in the festivities. So James Joyce, as viewers of this channel might know, is someone whom I take the liveliest interest. I was on a pilgrimage to his grave in Zurich, Switzerland, about a year and a half ago. So Joyce is a Dubliner, born in 1882. He's born the same year as de Valera. Of course, Eamon de Valera was born in New York. Joyce, I don't want to go too much into his biography, but he was from a well-to-do middle-class Catholic family. His father's from Cork originally, and Joyce went to some of the best schools in Ireland, went to Clongowes Wood at 6:30, as he said himself. I'm a huge aficionado of A Portrait of the Artist as a young man. In fact, I think my very first YouTube video ever was about that very said novel. But he went to UCD at 16. He was someone who was a real prodigy. He learned Norwegian so he could correspond with Ibsen, the remarkable Norwegian playwright. So Joyce, although he adored Ireland, he spent his entire adult life overseas, in Trieste, then the Austro-Hungarian Empire, briefly interned as a Briton by the Austrians in the First World War, lived in Switzerland, lived in Paris, died in Switzerland there for an eye operation, very briefly in London in the 1930s, married Nora Barnacle, his portable Ireland. You should see the film about him, it came out in 2000, starring that Scots actor, I forgot his name, Ewan McGregor, as Joyce. So it's taken the ancient Greek myth of Ulysses and his Odyssey, his 20-year, his many-year journey, return from Troy back to Ithaca, his home island, and the Ionian part of Greece, as in the coast close to Albania, not Ithaca, New York. So he was obviously a classicist, James Joyce, and learning ancient Greek and Latin was a crucial part of education in those days. So he's condensing all this into into one day in Dublin in June 1904. I don't remember the actual date. And as an allegory, it's very self-conscious, actually putting it in the title. You gave the game away. Wouldn't it be better to see people try and puzzle it out? This is divided into various episodes. I shan't give you a complete synopsis of the storyline, but it features very colourful and notable characters. Thank you, Audrey, for Malachi Mulligan, who's a medical undergraduate. So Joyce, he took a degree in arts at University College Dublin. He was considering studying medicine in Paris and being a doctor just so he'd have a comfortable living and then devote himself to writing. But he found bizarrely his French wasn't up to it, nor was his eyesight actually. He had severe ophthalmological problems, and that's why he often wore white things so that it would reflect enough light onto the paper, could see what he was doing. And it was eventually an eye operation that was to kill him in Zurich during the Second World War. He was a neutral, so he could live in Paris openly. And though 2 Irish diplomats happened to be in Zurich at the time, neither attended his funeral because he was sort of an outcast by the Irish establishment because he'd written a dirty book, as they saw it. And as in A Portrait of the Artist as a Young Man, Stephen Dedalus appears in it, and that's an alias for Joyce himself, about that Martello Tower at Sandy Cove. I was there summer before last, but it wasn't open to the public owing to coronavirus. I have a feeling I went into it when I was 7, so that's a very she South Dublin suburb, right by the sea. The Martello Towers, they built by the government of Ireland and in Great Britain as well, against the French invasion, planned invasion in the Napoleonic era. It's because there was in Sardinia, there's a Martello Tower, the original one, thought to be impregnable. That's why it was emulated. Anyway, and then there's an old man who represents Nestor. You know, "Oh Brother, Where Art Thou?" There's also a retelling of the Odyssey, but set in the south of the United States of the Great Depression. "You're about as Irish as a Union Jack." Well, thank you so much, because a Union Jack is Irish, flies over part of Ireland to this day. Our real flag, the cross of St. Patrick, is on it. So I'm Irish, that's what makes me British, and like almost every island, we've got some Welsh, Scots, and English ancestry. I think, so far as I know, I'm not remotely Scots, probably a tiny bit English and Welsh, but that's centuries ago. Even if I found out I wasn't remotely English and Welsh, that wouldn't change my view one whit. And obviously, lots of people in Great Britain are partly Irish, so we're completely intermingled. I know the new Irish, not quite like that, the Nigerian Irish and the Chinese Irish people, but they have as much right to be an island as I do. Anyway, so you meet all sorts of very alluring characters, or some repulsive characters. Is very frank about bodily functions, so some people found it rather too scatological. So the protagonist is Leopold Bloom, someone who sells advertising, and it's also very candid about exactly what he's eating and describing it in rather gruesome detail. Anyway, and we meet lotus eaters and things like that. People are just happy to laze around being idle. We go to the underworld, as it were, and for example, there's somebody who represents the Cyclops, and I think the Cyclops is throwing stones at one point, and someone who has like beer glasses chucked him in a pub, and then there's Scylla and Charybdis as in between this sea monster and a whirlpool. How is he going to navigate his way between these two mortal perils? The wandering rocks, and then sirens, as in these nubile women of the most soul-stealing, irresistible sex appeal, and how is he going to resist the mortal danger that they represent, and so forth. I mean, I can't do it in correct sequence. And there's Circe as well. But it goes on and on, so it's been widely appreciated. It was serialised from before the First World War, finally printed by Shakespeare and Company, that English language printing company in Paris, which exists to this day. And I've been in it, and if you're a writer, convince them you're good enough, you can even stay there, sleep overnight for free, I think just for one night. So it was published on Joyce's birthday, the 2nd of February, by Sylvia Beach. And because they didn't mind what they published in in English, sorry. So France was pleasingly free of censorship. You know, the Irish Free State had just been established, so we had stringent censorship. The United Kingdom was only a little more liberal in this. The United States, despite their First Amendment constitutional rule about freedom of expression, wouldn't allow what they considered to be smut or anything they thought tended to deprave or degrade people, anything they thought was remotely pornographic or obscene, the Comstock Act. And there were a lot of Puritans and Pharisees and bigots trying to police our people's literary tastes. The United Kingdom got most of that in 1936, and virtually all of it by the 60s. Republic of Ireland were a little bit behind on that one. It's now part of our literary canon, so he's widely recognised as being one of the most magnificent Irish writers of all times. But there have been lots of protracted legal quarrels about exactly which the correct edition is, because Joyce wasn't a prolific writer, but everything was just flawlessly crafted. He wrote and he rewrote it, and it seems spare, jejune, sometimes just underdeveloped, but it's not meagre, because he always tried to choose le mot juste, and redrafted it countless times to make it unimprovable. So it was applauded by some people, despite the acclamation from modernists. It was panned by others. It was certainly audacious. Was it too showy? So some people didn't warm to it at all. It's been turned into a play, not terribly successfully, and not very good as a film either. But I have not read the whole thing, but I would warmly recommend it to you. So that is James Joyce. He was always innovative, and I must go and retrace around Dublin and other places. I've seen some plaques on the houses where he lived. So he's a modernist where the character development matters more than the actual plot. But like, well, you know, Portrait of the Artist as a Young Man is a kind of Bildungsroman, but this is not, because Portrait of the Artist as a Young Man takes him from the age of 6 months to the age of 20, roughly, whereas Ulysses is very different. it's almost in real time. The amount of time it takes you to read it is almost the amount of time the events happen in. And he often tries to represent just the natter, the hubbub of a city. That's enough from me. Well, let me say toodaloo. So thank you for subscribing to my channel, and thank you for your generous donations to me on PayPal, georgecallahan79 @gmail.com. Toodaloo.